Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Lynnclaire Dennis is back with me again. So for anyone who may have missed it, we did a couple of interviews or a two-part interview, which I posted in late September, I think, but I will put the links in the description so you guys can go back and watch that first. But Lynnclaire was so kind to offer her time to come back and do a Q&A. So a couple of weeks ago, I put out that Lynnclaire Dennis will be answering your questions in an upcoming interview. I'm very excited. Lynnclaire, thank you for being with us. Oh, and before we get into it, I do want to mention that all of Lynnclaire's links will be in the description. She has a lot going on, which we will also mention again at the end of the interview. So check out the description box to get in touch with Lynnclaire. Hello, Lynnclaire. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Melissa. It's great. It's early morning for you. It's early evening for me. So it's kind of fun to do the 8-hour time change dance.
It really is. It's so much fun to talk to people in the other parts of the world.
Absolutely.
So let's jump in with the questions. The first question that I would like to ask you, just because I have been wanting to ask you this myself since our interview. When you shared your near-death experience before, you talked about the pattern and you briefly mentioned that there was something in the center of the pattern. And I didn't have a chance to ask you more about that, but I would like to know, and there's other people who would like to know more about what is in the center of the pattern.
Good. It's a great question. If you go to Marian.org, you'll find the link to our book, The Marian Matrix, Everything Connected Through Nothing. What's in the center is a crystalline structure. It's a dynamic structure. I long described it. I used to say it's a diamond, and Luke Hoffman, my mathematician, would say, no, Lynnclaire, you need to say it's diamond-like. But I always said it's carbon, but it's dynamic. And so if you think of a cell model, the outside is a bubble. The inside, this inside geodesic structure is also dynamic, and it's carbon. We believe it's carbon. And the pattern is the language that connects the two. So like a cell, it's a boundary and it's a nucleus. So that's the simplest way to think of it. And the interesting thing about that structure is what I remember so clearly from the experience is thinking, I don't think I'm supposed to be able to see this. So I really have to remember. And I was able to remember it. And Bob Gray, bless his heart, was able to animate it. And anyone who's familiar with the buckyball, with Buckminster Fuller's work, the jitterbug, the core is composed of 6 interacting jitterbugs, while the bubble is easily defined by 5 interacting jitterbugs. And the knot, the Marian trefoil, is the language between the two of them. So it's all geometry, and so many people think of geometry as sacred. And I like to remind everyone that if geometry is sacred, everything is sacred. If anything is sacred, everything is sacred.
I don't know if you're familiar with Nancy Rhymes, but she had a near-death experience also, and she described seeing the pattern of love and said that it was a crystalline structure, like an electromagnetic crystalline structure also. So that's very interesting to me.
Well, you know, I've always said, you know, I'm certainly not the first person or the last person to experience geometry or even topology. But I think the one thing that's unique is, you know, we're not finding anybody else reporting it in this detail. So it's like, why me? I guess, why not?
So in our previous interview, you made the statement, you can negotiate with the universe. Our question is, what does this mean to negotiate with the universe, and how do you do that?
Yeah, I loved, someone asked that question. It was one of the first questions, or actually it was a statement that someone said, wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Just the idea that you can negotiate with the universe. Well, if you go back to my 3rd NDE in February of 2001 on the island of Bornholm, I had a choice. The doctors had told me my neck was broken, but I was given a choice. I was given what I now understand, the 3 words, will you still, as a condition. And I made it really clear that I was not willing to live in a body that I couldn't work, function. And so my answer was, until I draw my last breath. That was me negotiating with the universe. I was answering a question as honestly and as truthfully as I could in that moment. And so to negotiate with the universe is the first universe that you have to negotiate with, and it's you negotiating with yourself. And it always has to do with time and timing, with where you are in the moment, with any decision that you're making. You know, you have to look at it from so many different perspectives. Is it good for your body? You know, is it coherent with your values? Can you connect it with everything else you have going on in your life right now? Is it truly a priority? Is it something you want to make a promise to? We're all wounded by compromise and broken promises. So that's when you get to that point, if you think you want to make a promise, then you have to look and see, is the time right? And is the timing correct? And that's the point where negotiating with the universe is negotiation within yourself and all that is divine within you. Because that's where spiritual coherence emerges from. The second point that you can negotiate, if you feel that deep, resonant, internal coherence about eternity, about the present moment, and about what you're anticipating in the future, not expecting, anticipating, because we can't control outcomes, okay? Then there's a second point of negotiation. And that again revolves around coherence. And for me, coherence is all about spirituality. It's not religion, it's about spirituality. Is what I say I'm doing going to show up in what I do? Do my walk and my talk match? And if they don't, I can go, wait a minute. This is not, yes, this might be aligned with my values, but there's something off with my vision. And maybe I need just to, like, I wear glasses, just only to read or do close computer work like we're doing now. But every once in a while, about every 2 years, I need to get a new prescription. So when we're making decisions, sometimes we need to regrind our lens so that we see our vision or our values a little clearer. So these are the points of negotiation. They're all internal, they're all within you.
I thought this was a really good question. So I believe it was your dad who said to you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you will never remember the light by analyzing the darkness. So what does that mean for us here when we are dealing with so much darkness in the world around us, or even within ourselves, depression and anxiety?
Absolutely. Let's do an example, something very simple. We know that to see a rainbow, you have to face the storm. If you turn around, you're looking into the sun. And the minute you look into the sun, you close your eyes. Welcome to the darkness. You're blinded by the light. So rather than analyzing the darkness, see it for what it is, appreciate the rainbow when it appears, that's the light breaking through, and realize that the light, not only the light behind your head, that's that halo again, but when you have the light behind your head, your path is very clear and you can see your way through like a pilot navigates clouds. Do you get tired of how people judge you and you're being judged and I'm right, you're wrong, those kind of scenarios? I get judged all the time for watching the news. I watch the news every morning. I'm not going to say what newscast I watch. It's not important, but I watch American news. I watch European news. I watch Spanish news and I watch the British news. Why? Because I'm here to make a positive difference in the world. And if I don't know what in the world someone somewhere wants me to think is going on, I don't know how to navigate that.
Mm.
So I don't want to ignore anything that's going on, but I don't have any need to go and kind of pick scabs and try to dig into it and figure out what's going on. You know, there's lots of darkness. There's lots of, you know, malfeasance and malice and actual evil going on in the world. I don't need to take a magnifying glass. I don't need to go, you know, it's the old story of the little girl who was the two children, maybe you know the story, given everything they wanted. One room was filled with toys and nothing was good enough for the child who had everything. But another child was given a room that was filled with horse manure. And she was absolutely joyous. And the question was asked, why is nothing good enough for this child? But to this little girl who's plowing through the horse manure, why are you so happy? And she said, with all this horse manure, there has to be a pony in here somewhere. Okay, so I don't feel any need to believe that there's something good in a pile of horse manure. If it stinks, I don't want to go near it. I just want to be aware of it so I can sidestep around it, so it doesn't interfere with my path, what I'm doing. And I don't know about you, but I've confronted enough evil in my life. And it's, you know, being aware of it is one thing, but I don't have to counter it. I don't have to pick a fight with it.
To see it and maybe greet it with acceptance for what it is rather than trying to fight it.
Do you know the Hawaiians have a concept and it's called Ho'oponopono? You know, I lived in Hawaii for quite a while. Ho'oponopono says that what I recognize in you, the only reason I recognize it in you is because it exists in me. So I'm doing my best when I see something that I don't like in someone else to heal and forgive that piece of me that's still holding on to that. And that's the fastest thing we can do, because the hardest person to forgive, I think, is ourselves. And when we can embrace that, then our lives shift quite dramatically, because it means we've accepted responsibility for our choices. Because I don't know about you, but every bad decision I've ever made in my life that's caused me lots of pain comes back down to me. I acted against my best knowing. I did something to try to please someone else. It always backfires, always goes sideways. So yeah, it's being authentic. It's just realizing that, you know, giving someone else the pen and saying, here, you write my life story. What kind of a life is that?
Dwayne asks, is there an eternal hell that people can go to and get stuck there forever?
I don't know about getting stuck there forever, but I see a lot of people right here on planet Earth who have made hell and are creating hell on Earth right here in this present moment. And to me, hell, you know, we've got a live volcano that's been going off here for over a month, I think maybe 35 days on La Palma. It's in the Canary Islands. And I look at that and I hear the sound and I think, this is Mother Nature really not being very happy right now. And I look at the fight that's going on for climate change. I look at this weather that's hitting California's been in a drought for the whole Western United States has been in a drought for so long.
Yeah.
We're having a drought here as well. Look at the fires that, you know, I survived a few weeks ago. Our behavior, is our responsibility to create heaven right here in this present time. And hell can exist in your head, it can exist in your emotional body, You can wreak hell on your physical body. So does it have to be forever? No. You need to recognize that this is hell. And if what I experienced is love, and it is that pattern that's generated by that dynamic geometry, that beautiful, glorious crystalline structure, then Dwayne, what I would say to you is, breathe, take a breath. Remember the first time you felt loved. Remember what it is to feel that unconditional loving, and it's there for you at any moment. Sometimes it just requires courage to ask for it.
We are creating either heaven or hell.
Absolutely. Isn't that true of our own inner lives and our relationships?
Yeah.
It comes back down to, do you want the love you want, or do you want to be in control, illusion of being in control, or do you want to try to be right all the time? Creating the conditions for love, understanding, acceptance of yourself invites others into your experience. It comes back to that whole Ho'oponopono thing. When you see someone who's loving and you find that attractive, that means it's present inside of you. That means you deserve that same love that you see reflected or echoed in someone else. And the most important thing, most people who are interested in near-death experiences, I think so many grew up with the love your neighbor as yourself, and that gets short-stopped to love your neighbor, and we forget to love ourselves. But they're doing all these good works at the expense of bankrupting themselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, and many financially. I've seen that happen before. But service means to serve, you have to know that you deserve, and that you are worthy and deserving of loving. And I think what would transform the world would be that if in one knowing, in one moment, someone could absolutely know that they're lovable. That's a transformative moment, because if you know you're lovable, all of a sudden your behavior begins to change. And that's when you taste heaven.
Oh, yeah. And I experienced that myself, and it took years of reprogramming my subconscious beliefs and therapy to get to that moment where it shifted.
You know what? And the good news is we're working on a number of things. It doesn't need to take years. We don't have time for it to take years.
Right?
So, that's what the Nameless Academy and several other projects that we'll talk about later are getting ready to come out. But imagine if you heard something that just changed everything inside of you. Remember, it was sound. It was music that gave me a reason to come back to life, because the pattern, the only word with all capital letters in my book was not pattern. It wasn't love. It was music. And so it's that harmony. It's finding that deep and abiding place of harmony within. It's when your brain and your heart begin to resonate together, what's possible? Amazing. Amazing things. So healing is possible.
I believe it was Niels Bohr who said that the entire universe is energy fields playing, and physicists are trying to figure out the melody. So the entire universe is music. And I also heard you say in a comment response that you love to somebody that Niels Bohr saw the pattern in a dream.
Well, Niels Bohr came back and he drew the symbol that we all grew to fear, and that's the three rings. Okay, so the question I asked is, what if he saw the pattern but broke the knot because he saw it as three concentric rings?
Oh, okay.
So I believe he probably did see the pattern. Doesn't mean he saw the geometry and everything else, but if this is the orbital spin of all the electrons, as my friend Sasha Shulgin suggested that it may well be, then we're looking at some powerful new healing tools. Because think about how our energy is not synchronized. It's out of alignment. I mean, if I were to play you Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and made one mistake, you and everybody else who heard it would say, wasn't right, was out of key. She hit a bad note. It's that simple.
Mhm.
So it's about harmony. And it's been, Kepler talked about the music of the spheres. Dr. Fuller talked about geospheres. Marion is a geospherical universe, and the pattern is how they're connected. So imagine if we could reconnect from inside out.
Charles wants to know if you believe in reincarnation. And I would add to that, what is the purpose of our life here? Whether it's just one life or whether we're coming back over and over, why are we here?
Yeah, well, we come back. First of all, the answer is yes, I do, because there's this law called conservation of energy. And so I think we live in a big recycling system. And I'm not going to deny my experiences, or more importantly, having the honor of being so close to the Tibetan Buddhist community, who is well known to believe in, to not only believe, but have demonstrate evidence about reincarnation. Just a couple of days ago, if you haven't seen it, it was I think it's October 2017, the comedian John Oliver did an interview with the Dalai Lama. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And the Dalai Lama is the 17th, he's had 17 incarnations in the same body, because he was the social political leader of Tibet. And so the recognition, how they find the Dalai Lama, the new Dalai Lama, the new incarnation, is by showing him things that have been his for millennium, mixed in with things that are not there. So someone like the Dalai Lama has certainly come back time and time again with a very intentional purpose, I believe. That's my believing anyway. I have no reason to think otherwise.
Jay Smith asks, what do you think is the reason that some people have such negative near-death experiences, or we could expand that to be negative experiences of any kind?
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm just going to share a maybe that it might connect to what, His Holiness and Guntama, the Nechang Kutum, we're talking about fear. It's maybe if you see a semi truck coming at you, fear just takes you into that place. But I don't know, because I haven't had one of those. So for me, I know that it's fear, the fall down my stairs, running from the fire. I was afraid for my life. And there's no question I was operating on, I was lucid. I did all the things I was supposed to do, but there was fear. And fear sometimes makes us careless or not count the stairs accurately, whatever. So I wish I knew more, suggest more, but I would just look at, what our attitude is when we go into any situation. If we go in with understanding and intent to do our best, not to try to do our best, but to do our best, then the universe is going to cooperate with that.
So maybe if somebody does find themselves in a hellish experience, just remembering that the fear could be contributing to that, and remembering their own power to shift.
Well, do you remember I shared in my NDE, my second NDE, that I found myself in a box?
Yes.
And I found myself in fear. And I knew that getting over my fear was the only way to get out of that box. And that was to turn and go with the light. So that's probably the seed of my answer. I can also tell you that I've been in some really scary life situations that I had to get over the fear in order to be able to deal with them, to face it. Don't try to figure it out. It's that we're back to that darkness. Fear and darkness to me are synonyms. They're the same thing. Fear blinds us because we forget who we are. We forget everything we're about. So don't look into the light, go with the light.
All right. Well, this is sort of a fun question about your near-death experience. A couple people wanted to know about the man you met who told you that you would meet again in 27+1. And did you ever find out who this was?
Yes, I did. And as a matter of fact, this week I was actually writing about it because it's going to be in my new book that I'm writing. And it's a pretty amazing story. I was actually invited, just a quick nutshell to say, yes, I did. 27+1 turned out to be years. I was in the middle of the desert, but in southern Israel, to speak about this work at a music festival of all things. And it was like, what? Why are you inviting me? And the day I arrived in Eilat was the 28th anniversary of my near-death experience. And here I am in this huge group of people, hundreds of young people. I was probably the only person out of, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who didn't have a tattoo or dreadlocks. And it was like, what? Because I figured out that it was the day. I knew it was the day, and then the 27+1 made sense to me. But out of the darkness, someone in a cashmere coat and a wool sweater who looked as out of place as I did came up to me and said, "I'm here to meet you." And he had literally been driving into Jerusalem, was on his way to a business meeting when he got a Facebook message. And it was an announcement. It was an advert that he looked at, and it was about this music conference. And he couldn't explain it, but he turned around, canceled his appointment, drove 4 hours to the desert, no suitcase, no clothes, nothing, and was there. And it's still one of the most amazing experiences in both of our lives. We are in touch. We have been. I spent 6 months in Israel, in the Middle East. I was with the Palestinian community there, with the Jewish community there. It's just absolutely incredible experience. And we did what we were supposed to do, what we promised to do. It was amazing. So yeah, there'll be more details in the book.
Do you want to tell us about this book?
Well, we don't have a publication date yet. I'm still with the Nameless Academy with everything, but the working title is The Voice in the Mirror.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, probably 2022, we'll get it out.
Antoinette asked an interesting question. She said, "I'd like to know what the purpose of prayer is. Are certain things meant to happen, and can praying about them change anything?"
Yeah, good question, Antoinette. I grew up in a religious family, so prayer was something that was, almost a requirement. I have many friends who are, I had friends of mine come to my home, and they were getting ready for prayers before we ate dinner. And my friend Taha said to me, "Lynnclaire, do you know the direction of Mecca?" Because they had, he had to pray. And I said, "Yes, right there." I had no idea, but I knew. And so prayer has always been a big question, and it's a very good question. For me, I mean, if you think about the religious traditions in, say, Christianity or any kind of, well, let's just say Christianity, because that's the background I grew up in. The admonition is to pray without ceasing. I'm sorry. How do you pray with, if prayer is getting down and bowing your head and wearing out your kneecaps, how do you live your life? So for me, prayer is just another word for intention. Prayer is not about nagging on heaven's door. Prayer is not about negotiating with the universe. That's not what negotiating with the universe has nothing to do with prayer, has everything to do with internal coherence or relationships, agreements on relationships. Intention, prayer, focus, meditation. It's when I was at the monastery, when I was living at the monastery, Guntela, the monk, taught me that when I was fixing dinner, to be feeding the world, not just my own face, not just the face of the retreatant, but to feed the world. So put that intention into doing what you do. So often prayer is our attempt to manipulate the universe somehow, to get our way. Oh God, if you do this. I mean, I grew up with this whole concept of a police, where if you do this, I'll do this. If you do this, that's a manipulating the universe, because whoever, it's like New Year's resolutions, they fall into the abyss. Days, hours, maybe weeks after you make them. So I like to think of prayer as intentionality. Do what I say it with kindness, be focused, be present. Don't be in my past, just be in the moment. And if I do my best, I know the universe is going to cooperate. And you can put the word God in there, you can put any divine name that you want to put in there, will cooperate.
Sort of along those same lines.
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm going to butcher this name, so I'm super sorry, but Sibikizil, I'm sure I got that wrong. I'm so sorry. Asks, what advice can you give to those who are dealing with maybe religious family or friends in their life who are being pushy about their beliefs?
Honoring our unity and celebrating our diversity is what it comes back down to.
Yes.
Honor, go for the love that connects you in the first place. And we've all been there. I used to be very religious. You and I have had some talks about this.
Yeah.
And I was a poster child for a religious organization that it was that way or the highway. This was the franchise on the front door to heaven. Nobody else was getting through. And so to have that belief system absolutely eradicated, but replaced by what? The figurehead of that organization, this individual named Jesus, whose title was one who was anointed with light. That's the meaning. Christ is not Jesus' last name. It's so important to remember. It means he was anointed with light. That means the light was behind him, not on his face. He didn't want to be a celebrity. He didn't want to be a star. So go to the love that every spiritual teacher talks about. Hold that space, bathe in that space, flow in that space. It will carry you wherever you want to go. And I like to say that I think if Muhammad and Jesus and Buddha, I think they're all back here, and I'm sure they're wondering what's going on. They've been here many times, but I think all they would do if they got together was party. Because they know the truth, and the truth is love. And it's not about the thou shalt nots and the this and the that. Yes, there's laws of the land that we all have to abide by. But I think if we can just honor our uniqueness and celebrate what is our God essential sameness, then the world will change all around you quickly.
So what I hear you saying is that, first of all, it's not about the religion, it's about love. But also for those of us who are on this side of it, who have deconstructed from religion or whatever word is appropriate, remembering to treat those who are still religious and maybe pushy about their religious beliefs with that same love.
Absolutely. And remember this, The word religion is beautiful. The word is religio, and it means to connect. And the meaning doesn't mean to blow us apart, to separate us, to put us in this, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Catholic, I'm Jewish, I'm this, I'm that. That's not what religion is meant to do. We all are made of the same stuff. We are made of star stuff. And what makes us unique is where our star stuff came from. That's it. And how it's assembled, how it got put together. And that comes down to our DNA and our ancestors. But what's interesting to me is if you go back and you go back and you go back, do you know that we all, every 7 billion, 7 point something billion of us on the planet come from 3 mothers? Remember that next time you want to judge someone. What if they're your family?
It really puts things into perspective.
And that's what, perspective, whenever you find yourself judging or feeling like you're being judged, take a breath, inhale, feel it move, and let it lift you to a new perspective. And then hold that breath before you exhale it and let it go slowly. Don't just let it breathe out, because it'll take a lot of those toxins, those toxic thoughts with it, if you just are willing and open to consider a new perspective.
Well, Lynnclaire, this has been wonderful. I want to thank you for having this conversation with me. Is there anything you'd like to say about your work and what you're doing before we go?
Well, let me just say that, the Nameless Academy, two of us were in the same room, the other 3 were on Zoom, and we just did a video for the Taos Institute. They're having a conference next weekend. It's November 3rd and 4th, maybe 4th and 5th, called Education as Relating. And of course, that touches on everything that we're all about, because everything that I learn about myself that I think works for me, I have to take it out and test run it in relationships, because that's where we find out if what we think is true for us is really true, because it either resonates with other people or it doesn't. So there'll be a video of us up there. It's pretty funny. We had a lot of fun doing it, but our website will be up by that time as well.
I'll have all of your websites in the description, and the Nameless Academy, when you get that up.
It's been a blessing. Thank you so much, Melissa.